Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining me on this call this afternoon. I'm delighted to be here as Police and Crime Commissioner for the Cleveland area, but joining me on the call is Joanne Hodgkinson, who's the Chief Executive of Safe and Tees Valley.
Hello.
Dave Mead. Hello, Joe. Dave Mead, who's the head of VCAS, the Victim Care and Advice Service. Hello, Dave. And John Morgan's joined us, and John's the head of crime with Cleveland Police. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. So what I'd like to do initially is to just invite Joe and Dave to give a bit of an overview of the work that Safe and Tees Valley does and that VCAS does, if you don't mind. Shall we start with you, Joe?
Yeah, we can do so. Safe and Tees Valley are commissioned to provide quite a few victim services in the Cleveland area. So firstly, we've got the Victim Care and Advice Service. We also provide Restorative Cleveland, which is a restorative justice service for those victims who've been obviously harmed by a crime. They get the opportunity to potentially meet up with their offender, who often says sorry and tries to repair some of that harm. And then we've also got the Sexual Assault Referral Centre that we run out of Helen Britton House, which is over at North Ormsby in the medical village there. So they're our key victim services that we provide on your behalf, Barry.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Dave, do you want to say a bit about VCAS?
Yes, certainly. Just picking up from what Joe said, we have the privilege to be the service that supports victims of crime right the way across the Cleveland area. And that will be ranging really at one end, although I don't wish to decry it, school bullying, right the way to the more serious end where people are losing loved ones through fatal road traffic collisions, homicide, the full gamut of victimisation. We're there to provide a very personalised one-on-one support to help that person cope with the crime and then recover from the effects following that.
Good, thanks, John. Thanks, Dave. Sorry. John's next. John, welcome. Would you like to say a bit about the work that Cleveland Police do to support victims?
Yeah, we focus quite a lot on this. It's an important area for us in terms of improving confidence and satisfaction, and we provide high quality updates as soon as we can to victims of crime and refer through to partnership agencies when necessary. And we've done a lot of work around the COVID period, in particular to support victims of domestic abuse. We've taken various quite innovative opportunities to make contact with them through the police and partner agencies. So really important to us. Victims mean a lot to us, and we do everything we can.
Good. Okay, thank you all for those introductory comments. I've got a few questions to put now, and we'll work through them. The first question, we'll start with VCAS. I'm aware that as a service, VCAS have efficiently implemented new ways of working as a result of the COVID-19 crisis. Can you tell us a little bit more about the work VCAS have been doing around this and how victims have responded?
Yeah, I'll take this question, Barry. I think in the first couple of weeks of the COVID crisis, our main priority really was to maintain the safety of both our clients and our staff. So we made a decision about the middle of March to cancel appointments into clients' homes and just to offer telephone-based support, which the public have really reacted quite positively to and have really valued that telephone-based contact. We have given the extra option to some of our clients to have video calls with some of our victim care officers, and some individuals have taken that up, but obviously everyone has different levels of confidence around use of technology. So I think people are really valuing telephone-based support. What we're finding is with some of our staff, they're experiencing that clients are wanting to stay on the phone for quite lengthy periods of time, sometimes up to 2 hours. So where we thought initially that some of our staff, because they weren't travelling to and from clients' homes, might have had a little bit more capacity, actually what we're finding is that some of our clients and victims are really wanting to spend longer with staff on the telephone. Just in the more recent weeks, we're looking at developing access to services via online platforms. So what we really want to do is get crime prevention messages out via social media, and I know Dave runs a fantastic scam awareness session. What we were trying to do is get that a video made up of that session so that we could then broadcast it out to people online, which would be really positive.
Okay, thanks for that, Joe. Do you want to add anything, Dave, or shall I move on to the next question?
Just one very quick thing to add. One of the services we also provided, the volunteer police cadets, which we run on behalf of Cleveland Police. The cadets have really done some fantastic work around reaching people of their age on the TikTok, social media. Recently been on Sky News, BBC and Tyne-Tees Television about a fantastic role play awareness situation, a video they did around domestic violence. They're already linking in with ourselves and the cybercrime unit from Cleveland Police to look at a sextortion video to protect young people from passing information on, and we're linking in with the Safer Communities Department and the cadets can use that platform to look at the evils around hate crime as well. So that's a really good way of getting the message out as well, perhaps reaching those hard to reach younger people who don't necessarily engage with people of our age talking on Skype.
Good, thanks, Dave. John, is anything you want to add about COVID and victims? Any particular aspect of it that's drawn your attention?
Yeah, well, I mentioned earlier the domestic abuse issue, and I've done some work with local radio and TV with regard to providing advice to victims of domestic abuse as how they can contact the police and other agencies, because it's one of those crimes that if people can't get out of the house, then victims, and predominantly female victims, will be struggling to make contact with the police. So there are opportunities through the Silent Solution network which they can contact the police without having to actually say anything, and we will ensure that we make contact and send a police officer around as soon as possible. And we've also done some work. We've created posters that are out in pharmacies, GPs, supermarkets, to signpost victims of domestic abuse to various agencies. So there's a lot of work being done through the police and partners to provide that support, because that is one big area of concern for us.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. The second question is around how are services ensuring that we're reaching out to our most vulnerable victims of crime and antisocial behaviour through this difficult period? Victims are a concern for all of us, but there are some who are especially vulnerable, and I wondered what your activities were around that. Do you want to start, Joe?
Can I take this one, if that's okay?
Of course, Dave.
With this one, really, we sort of approach this on 4 fronts. Probably one of the most effective ways we're working at the moment is we have one of our staff embedded within the force control room, sitting side by side with the control room operators and helping with those calls when people present distressed, needing help. And we've certainly widened that beyond victimisation to where people are just afraid. They don't like the situation they're in. They're not sure, and they're ringing the police or wherever to take those calls, deal with the crisis, and then forward on signposting to the most appropriate agencies, be it food banks, be it prescription collection services. So that's working really well. We've got some fantastic examples of how working side by side with Cleveland Police Control Room officers, we're able to do that partnership work at the first opportunity. So we're very, very proud of how we've been made to feel welcome in the force control room, and how we're augmenting their work as well. Secondly, we're looking at fraud victims as a particular group. Sadly, we've seen a huge rise, and this is locally as well as nationally, in fraud. Both COVID-related frauds, where perhaps people are claiming that they can sell them masks, they can send them hand gels, miracle cures to boost their immune systems, all of which are fraudulent. We've seen a huge increase in people being contacted by Virgin Media, or people purporting to be from Virgin Media, saying they haven't paid the bills, they're going to cut the television off, they're going to cut their internet off, they're going to cut the television off, basically cutting off all the things that we rely on at the moment to interact, and forcing people through coercion to part with extreme amounts of money. So we're doing lots of work around fraud victims. We're calling back, working through about 1,000 victims that we've supported previously, who've been victims of fraud, who have our call blockers in their homes. Likewise, anyone we've previously supported over the age of 65. We're putting the calls in, and we're calling them kindness calls. It's not necessarily about victimisation. It's how are you coping at this difficult time. We've seen some fantastic examples of communities coming together and helping individuals, but sadly we're seeing some people who are very much isolated and very much afraid. And again, we're able to signpost into Age UK or the most appropriate service.
Good, good. Anything else you want to add, John, to Dave's answer in terms of vulnerability?
No, I'll just touch on the stuff there that Dave's talked about in terms of the control room and how vital it is to have specialists at the first point of contact. You know, we are training our control room staff to recognise and understand vulnerability, but there's a lot of hidden victims and risks that people won't necessarily pick up on when they first take a call. So having those specialists there, it's really important. And the mental health liaison officers who also work in the control room can support officers in making the right decision in how to protect vulnerable people. So, you know, that front end activity is vitally important. We need the support from the people in the know, such as Dave's World, to help us.
Good. Okay, thanks. Just moving on slightly, has the service seen any changes in the support needs of victims that have been referred into your services? Obviously, we live in an ever-changing world, different types of crime emerge. Are the needs of people, from your point of view, changing and things that you do in terms of supporting them?
Yes, I think they are. Our experience, I think lots of other services' experience have been victims need different things following crime. Everyone's different. There's no off-the-shelf response to a burglary victim because a lot of it is their life experiences. What's happening in their life indicates how the crime's affected them. The fact many people, and it's been described to me, that feel as if they're living in a pressure cooker at the moment. They're not able to go out. That's exacerbating people's needs. We're seeing a huge increase in people having community disputes, falling out with neighbours, basically over noisy parties, whereas before perhaps they took themselves away. Now they can't because they're living in a closer proximity. And we've seen a big increase in these community tensions, starting off as arguing, name calling, and then escalating into criminal damage. And we've seen a worrying trend. And we are doing quite a bit of work around community mediation at the moment with your office, Barry, to look at bringing someone in to nip this in the bud and prevent that escalation.
So just on that, there isn't a mediation service that we can tap into at the moment. So that's something that we're currently looking at because we've recognised that it is a gap. So we are exploring that with some of your staff, Barry, just to see if there's something that we can do more in the future around mediation to stop the escalation and potentially something that can seem quite innocent suddenly escalating into somebody committing a crime without intentionally meaning to do so.
No, I think that's vital work, and I'm sure we'd be pleased to work with you on that, Joe, going forward. John, are you seeing anything different in terms of the calls that are coming into the force? Are there any particular issues that you wanted to flag up in terms of victim needs?
I think really the calls have always been there. It's just as an organisation we're becoming more sophisticated and we've got a better understanding of vulnerability and victims' needs. So, you know, for example, an ASB victim, you look at the wider aspects around that and what's impacting on them. Are they subject to criminal exploitation? You know, they've got mental health issues. You know, how many times are they called into the police? Are they repeat victims? And how are we best dealing with it in partnership? And you know, this all brings into question how we manage county lines and you know the newer crime types that coming to the forefront of policing. It's always been there. It's just that we've perhaps not recognised it before, so we need to be able to respond effectively.
Which leads into my next question, actually, which is: are there any particular crime types that have stood out during the lockdown period? Any emerging issues that have come through the COVID situation, or through the way that the rules have been drawn up that you're having to apply and that we hope in the public will support? Are there any aspects of this that have drawn out particular crime types?
Yeah, I mean, I've highlighted the domestic abuse situation. Actually, we at the beginning of the COVID crisis, we saw a drop in domestic abuse calls, which is worrying, because actually, in normal circumstances, you think this is good news, but the concern is that people are stuck in their homes and are unable to report to the police. And I've talked a bit about what we've done there, and also what we've done through the IDVA service is they are contacting our higher risk victims, which is really good. So we've provided all the information to the IDVAs, and they are making personal contact with individuals to provide them necessary support. I think in terms of missing, we've seen a slight increase in missing persons, either through children at children's homes who are flouting the guidance and regulations, but there's obviously the risk of increased mental health issues through people being in isolation, which we are acutely aware of. So it's things like that have we're seeing an increase of. And the other trend that I anticipate we'll see an increase in, but we won't see it yet, is probably online offending, because while people are stuck at home, there's a higher opportunity for them to use the internet. So there's likely to be an increase across all forces of online offending. And obviously, as we know, these are not just non-contact offences, because some of the offenders there then make future contact with individuals. So there's a risk there that we need to manage.
Yeah. I mean, another interesting example, I chair the multi-agency hate crime group, which pulls together different services on the force and my office, and the actual reporting of hate crime is quite low, but I think we all suspect that the incidences of hate crime are probably still there and still out there, and we need to do all we can to encourage people to report. And I think we'll hopefully do more work around this going forward. But
yeah,
I think the joined up work with the force and the local authority and the other partners and social housing, I think that's really important. Are you optimistic about the work that we're doing around hate crime?
Yeah, I think having only been in force for about 3 months now, looking at what's in place for quite a small force is quite impressive. And I think through the partnerships and the newly integrated neighbourhood teams, I think we've got quite a good structure to respond effectively to hate crime.
Yeah.
And looking at the other partnership structures around the match and the CHUB, how we support children, how we support vulnerable victims. I'm really impressed with the arrangements. So I think they're strong.
Good. Anything from the VCAS perspective?
Well, I guess just to add to that list that's already been mentioned, Barry, in terms of sexual abuse, we are noticing cases coming through our sexual assault referral centre going down. And we suspect that that's probably to do with the social distancing measures that have been put in place. But again, it'd be interesting to see if online sexual abuse increases because people are obviously restricted, not allowed to go into pubs and clubs, restaurants, things like that. So because the nighttime economy doesn't exist, that might be one of the reasons why some of the cases aren't coming through the SARC. But we may see sexual abuse online increasing at this time. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Moving on, from VCAS perspective, has the service seen an increase or a decrease in the referrals to the service? And if there's a variation, why do you think that might be?
Yeah, well, give a quick overview of where we were with cases. On the 23rd of March, we had about 220 cases that were open. Things felt very artificially quiet. The crimes we were screening every day were dropping significantly, and it felt very, very strange. Within the first month, we dropped to 196 cases, so about 23 cases less. As of 2 minutes to 2 this morning, we're back up to 225 cases. So I think we saw a dip, and that dip might have been while people were sort of adhering to the social sort of distancing. We've definitely seen an increase now, day on day. We're reviewing more crimes, we're taking more self-referrals, we're getting more referrals direct from police officers, and our member of staff embedded in the control room is picking up more. So we see now a big increase in demand.
has the VCAS service done any preventative work to safeguard and protect people from becoming a victim or a repeat victim of crime?
We see crime prevention as a key cornerstone of our organisation. We're in the process, and very shortly we'll be going live with a Friends Against Scams presentation. Used to be held bi-monthly for victims of fraud at headquarters. Obviously, that's not the case now. So we are looking at creating an online Friends Against Scams, which will be able to circulate widely. I mentioned before, we've had the police cadets there looking at 3 different strands of crime to get the crime prevention message out to young people who, let's face it, are very, very vulnerable. We're still delivering call blockers and crime prevention equipment to the most needy, and we're now delivering them by exactly the same as you would do with Amazon, where we're ringing the client, we're knocking at the door, leaving at the doorstep and explaining how it works. So we are still giving out the dummy cameras, the segment timers, the door alarms, the window alarms, the call blockers. We've got about 60 of those that we're handing out at the moment to vulnerable people. So yeah, we're doing as much as we possibly can, but of course, it's not just for us to do. We work very closely with other partners to support their needs, and likewise they work very closely with us, linking in very closely with trading standards as well across the county.
Yeah, okay, thanks. John, what about preventative work from the police point of view? Do you see a role there and something that can be developed further?
Yeah, I mean, the neighbourhood teams, they do a lot of work with repeat victims. So we know who our repeat victims are through the analytical work within the organisation, and we work with partners to carry out target hardening, provide crime prevention advice, and do the signposting through to support services, and that's bespoke dependent on the needs of the victim. So, you know, for me, it's a really important part of policing, because if we get that prevention and early intervention right, then that prevents further crime and prevents them from being a further victim. Absolutely,
and I think that's added to by the investment that I put into youth services as well, and the youth offending service. The more proactive work we can do with young people to prevent them from drifting off into offending behaviour, the more value that will give to the community. I also commission Show Racism the Red Card, who do a lot of work in schools with children at primary school age, and I think the sooner we can start to get to youngsters, the better, really. So I think we're all playing a part in that, and it's all really important work. Communications is really important, and I'll start with you, Joe and Dave. How is your service maintaining contact with key partners during this period, and is it a challenge?
I think it's yes, it is a challenge. I think everybody in the first couple of weeks was setting themselves up with IT and making sure that we could all, you know, conference call and video call, and I think everybody's managing that now. We do maintain links with all of our partners. We have a vast array of different organisations who we link into. So I've been making contact with, for example, Voluntary Development Agency. I attend a lot of meetings like the Criminal Justice Board. You mentioned earlier the Hate Crime Group. I know Dave attends that. So a lot of our staff are already maintaining those partnership meetings and managing to attend those. But you mentioned Show Racism earlier. I was speaking to Sue, the Show Racism the Red Card manager, just this morning. So I think we're all in regular contact with the people who we are working very closely with on a daily basis.
Yeah, good. John, how are you finding it from the police point of view? Are you managing to keep in touch with everyone?
Yeah, I think it was all a bit strange in the first couple of weeks, because, you know, people weren't sure what the position was in terms of social isolation and working from home, etc. But actually, that all seemed to level out in a short space of time. Actually, we're still in constant engagement with partners, providing the same level of service as we did before. It's just that we're doing it via Skype and other methods, rather than actually being sat in a room together. So, for example, all the child safeguarding issues that I talked about through the Chubb and the match, it's still business as usual.
Yeah. I mean, it's all about taking advantage of the technology that exists, isn't it? Including this call, of course. Dave, how do you find it from your practitioner's point of view as the VCAS manager?
Again, it's all about relationships with partner agencies, and they're very, very strong. We work very closely with Beyond Housing, the 13 Group, the Tenancy Enforcement. We sit on lots of different groups. I sit on the Hate Crime Group. Members of our team sit on the Modern Day Slavery, the Stalking Group. So we tend to know, we speak a lot, and certainly from our point of view, referrals from third-party agencies haven't reduced at all. And quite the opposite, we're finding we tend to be sort of pulling our collective wits together to see what can we do to support people in these difficult times. So if anything, out of adversity, I would like to think along the groups, amongst the groups, we're working a lot more closely and a lot more joined up.
Yeah, I mean, there's masses of work going on behind the scenes, isn't there, which most people will be unaware of, and particularly if they don't come into contact with any of these services. But I think we need to give our thanks to a whole lot of people. The last question I was going to put was around the courts. You'll be aware that the courts have kind of been stalled a bit by this process because of the same rules and guidelines that have to apply to everyone else. Has the change in delivery across the courts affected any of the services that you provide, and how have you been able to respond to that?
I mean, certainly from my point of view, we will support people right the way through the criminal process, and we do link in very closely with the Witness Care Unit and the Witness Service, who provide the support at court. A big chunk of that has gone now, and that has certainly added to victims and witnesses' worry about going to court. It's increased that nervousness, the feeling that they can't move on until this court process is over, and that's something we just have to deal with. And that's about empowering, it's about providing that emotional support, it's about talking through the problems and looking at the ways things can work more joined up. Yes, it is a problem, but we are working with it. And I do think, by and large, the public are very, very accepting. I've been nothing but impressed with the way that the people of Cleveland have dealt with this. Some of the most vulnerable victims of crime actually say, well, in this case, don't worry about me, worry about other people. And that's just how good some of the people are, majority of the people are in Cleveland. Don't worry about me, look after someone else. But we do want to look after them. And it's getting the message to people that we are very much alongside Cleveland Police and the other agencies. We are open for business, and we do want to talk to you.
Good. Okay, John, from your point of view, from the police, I mean, the courts has obviously stalled a bit. How's that impacted on you?
Well, we got some guidance from Crown Prosecution Service in terms of their thresholds for charging, which differs slightly from what we're normally used to. And I recognise that there's they need to manage the volume, and that has an impact then on the court process. But from a police perspective, if there is somebody that needs arresting and there's a risk issue around it, and we need to safeguard somebody and in order to do that, we need to arrest somebody, we will do it, irrespective of the future court process. We will commence the criminal justice process by doing the arrest that we need to do. If people don't need arresting, then we'll use the voluntary attendance scheme, and it's all about being proportionate in this particular difficult time. But we are proactive, we'll continue to be, and we'll work through the court process. I mean, we've had some fantastic results recently, as you're fully aware. So again, business as usual as far as we're concerned, but it's slightly different. It's that the criminal justice process has slowed down in some areas. Yeah,
good. Joe, is there anything you want to add before we draw things to a close?
I think the last thing to add is that we can't forget about the offenders as well. And because we can't interact with offenders in certainly looking at restorative justice and doing things for victims to try and repair some of that harm, one of the things that we have been doing is we've developed a victim awareness pack, which we've asked prison officers to use on our behalf in prisons with some of the offenders. And we've also set up our ability to now contact the prisoners through an email system, a secure prison email system, so that we can still keep that dialogue going with them whilst they are obviously limited. Staff can't go into the prison at the moment, but we are keeping those dialogues and discussions going with offenders at this time as well.
Good. Thank you. Thank you to all of you for giving up your time and for contributing to this. Just a couple of comments before we go. First of all, I think we need to put on record our thanks and congratulations to the fantastic work the cadets have been doing. And I know it's been recognised, and I know the police cadets or the police are involved. I know Safe and Tees Valley are heavily involved, and I sponsor that activity. So I think we're all really proud of them. They're a great example to young people, and it's fantastic that they've got that recognition. I think also thanks to everyone who works in a voluntary capacity. I know VCAS, you utilise volunteers. I know the force utilise volunteers, and we have the special constabulary who give up their own time to work tirelessly to keep us safe. And I think thank you to all of those as well. This is part of an ongoing series of scrutiny sessions that I've held. We are undertaking consultation with the public around a range of different activities. We've got a rural crime survey out at the moment for rural crime area dwellers, and ask people in those rural areas to respond and give us their thoughts. We've got a more general consultation out through Teesside University to the general public, asking how they feel that the area is being policed in the COVID situation and whether the force have used their powers appropriately. My conclusion on the basis of what I've seen so far is that you've got the balance about right, but I think we should always be listening and learning, and I'm sure that we'll continue to do that. The hate crime group will continue as well, as we've mentioned, and I'm hoping we can take advantage of some of the national funding opportunities that might come along. So thank you all very much for your time. Thank you for your contributions, and let's continue to work together to keep the Cleveland area safer. Thank you very much.
That's great. Thank you.